Down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I am your ever so humble but looking to be accurate and truthful host, Rick. That's right. I am looking to be accurate and truthful. And that's a little bit about why I put in the title, Bringing the Bona Fides, or as Dan Bongino calls them, the Bona Fides. I have a few articles here. I kind of mentioned a couple of things last week, the week before, and I felt as though it wasn't that I needed to back up what I was saying. And the reason being is because I am a researcher. I am an opinion host. I am an analyst. And I am trying to make this broadcast, this place right here, a place for you to come in order to get factual information and to be able to be entertained and to see the information correlated in maybe an enlightening and a different way. So, I'm actually trying to make this broadcast, this podcast, honestly, I want to make it valid. I want to make it not a place that necessarily that you go. I mean, obviously I want you entertained because of course having fun is part of it. But at the same time, I want to make sure that you can be reliant upon me to bring you factual, fact-based information. And so this is pretty much what I am going to try and demonstrate tonight. If I have any brand new people who are out here, I appreciate you coming and joining. I definitely appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day to come here and to at least watch and hopefully learn something in the process. I've been spending a lot of time this past week ever since, Hannah kind of, I'll be honest with you, the interview with Hannah Guile kind of kicked it off. After that interview, I was feeling really, really good. And of course, with the additional promotion through the Mark K show, I really now am focused and driven to make this podcast take off and hopefully become someplace where people can come in order to gain information, glean information, see the correlations between things, and to bring value to my listeners and subscribers, and even just those that stop by and maybe listen to one or two videos. And the reason being is because of the fact that I've always had a desire in my life to ensure that whatever I say is accurate, is truthful, is on point and relevant to the situation. A friend of mine and we talk quite a bit. I kind of mentioned him a couple times on the podcast, and he and I talk every so often, but one of his famous sayings that he says is that he is not that impressed with all of those people who have those educated degrees, who have all of these university degrees, the bachelor degrees, the master's degrees, the PhDs, because in his mind, it's not so much what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. And that's really where things have to essentially be where the rubber meets the road. Because you can have all kinds of knowledge and you can have all kinds of book learning, but unless you actually can apply it in real world scenarios, dealing with a theoretical world is essentially nothing in particular. Because of the fact that the real world doesn't necessarily function like the theoretical world. I live in reality. And so what I want to bring to you in this podcast is a form of entertainment and informational boundaries, I guess. Boundaries isn't really quite the right word that I'm looking for, but I want it to be informative and entertaining, but at the same time, the information that you're getting, I want it to be factual and accurate. And so when I make claims like I did a couple podcasts ago or a couple episodes ago, where I was talking about Huawei and I was talking about the Chinese having things coming over here and being a greater threat to us than even Russia is. When I make those kinds of claims, I want to be able to back them up, and I want to be able to provide you with alternative viewpoints so that you at least can have the trust in me to be bringing the information to you. You know, the other thing about all of this is that I also want to make sure that I recognize people for when they do things for me, and make sure that they get the recognition they deserve. Because a lot of times, you know, even just by coming here and watching this podcast and taking time out of all of your busy schedules to spend time with me is humbling on my side, because of the fact that I feel like I want to provide a service to you as a listener or a watcher, depending upon which type of medium you are looking for. But I also want to make sure that you get value out of this relationship, out of your spending time to come here, as well as I need to make sure that I provide quality content for you. As a part of that quality content, I also feel bad because last week I apparently wasn't paying as much attention to the Rumble rants as I should have. And I discovered the next day that I actually had received a couple of rants during the show last week, or I guess it was on Wednesday. And I did not call those people out and say thank you for that. So tonight, hopefully you're watching. I don't know where they came from. There's no way for me to know who gave what. If I don't catch it on the night that it occurs, then I'm not going to be able to see afterward. There's no tracking information that's provided to me in terms of who provided what and how much. But it appears that there is likely, based on the amount, that there were likely 2 Rumble rants that I missed last week. And so with a heartfelt apology, I apologize for not calling you out, not bringing your name up on the screen. I appreciate the fact that you decided to support the program and toss some hard-earned money my way in the form of a Rumble rant. And I really, really appreciate it. Believe me, it's again, I am trying to grow this podcast. I've taken it on. I want to grow it. And so toward that end, I will have an ask of you toward the end of the night. But I don't want to get into that right now. Right now, though, I do want to segue into one of my affiliations, and it's a great affiliation. I got to figure out which one it is. If you honor and value our God-given right to self-defense by owning a firearm and would appreciate joining a community of like-minded individuals who welcome firearm owners of all experience levels, then you should consider joining the NCCA. The National Concealed Carry Association, NCCA, exists to serve the Second Amendment community by providing a nationwide network of Second Amendment advocates, offer elite self-defense and concealed carry training from the nation's top instructors, and provide rock-bottom prices on the best selection of gear and accessories. The NCCA members enjoy shopping thousands of products with zero dealer markup, unlimited free shipping, and keep more money in their pockets with zero credit card processing fees. The NCCA encourages safe, responsible concealed carry and celebrates those who are brave enough to protect not only themselves, but their families and their communities. If this sounds good to you, visit nationalconcealedcarryassociation.com to join today. As a special bonus, use my affiliate link, ncca.refr.cc /Rick, RICK, 02, to receive a code for 10% off any purchase at nationalconcealedcarryassociation.com. Once again, use my affiliate link, ncca.refr.cc/Rick, RICK02, and receive a 10% code off of your purchase at nationalconcealedcarryassociation.com. Visit National Concealed Carry Association, that's all lowercase, all one word, .com to find out more today. And I thank the National Concealed Carry Association for allowing me to be a brand ambassador for them. All right. So tonight I've got a couple of different articles out here, but two of them popped this week and they were relevant to something that I had talked about in the last couple of episodes, specifically one of them about Huawei and a discovery that was made about Huawei. And I have a couple of other articles, and we want to take a closer look at a couple things in terms of like Biden's approval ratings and that kind of stuff that I'm going to toss in there. And before I get to that, though, and yes, I see, buddy, I see that funny little chat that you threw up there. Yeah, you've already done quite a bit for me, and I do appreciate that, by the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to On This Day in American History. And of course, for On This Day in American History, we read from the book, The American Patriot's Almanac. It is available for sale. I got this off of Amazon, but you can get it pretty much wherever other booksellers books are sold. And it covers bits and pieces of our American history, and based off of date. And it's really a good resource. There's a lot of good information, a lot of good historical facts in here. And it's really, really fun for me anyway, to go through and to flip through and find them find different days and things like that. All right. This is Grant's memoirs. In 1884, Ulysses S. Grant, former general of the Union armies and president of the United States, suddenly found himself penniless and humiliated. His brokerage firm, Grant & Ward, had collapsed with the discovery that his partner, Ferdinand Ward, was a crook who had stolen investors' money. 62-year-old Grant, an honorable and beloved man, was devastated. And it got worse. That fall, he consulted a doctor about a nagging soreness in his throat. The expression on the specialist's face told Grant the news was bad. "Is it cancer?" he asked. It was, and there was little hope of survival. Grant quickly made a decision. He had never wanted to write his memoirs, but he realized that would be the best way to provide for his wife, Julia, and his family. If the book sold well, they would have some financial security when he was gone. His friend Mark Twain agreed to publish the work. So Grant started writing in a race against death. "My family is American and has been for generations, in all its branches, direct and collateral," he began. The Grants moved to the Adirondack Mountains, hoping the mountain air would make him more comfortable. Every day he sat on the porch, propped in a chair, barely able even to swallow, suffering from intense pain in his throat, but writing steadily. He wrote mainly of his military career, but also of his confidence that Northerners and Southerners would once again be fast friends. "I cannot stay to be living witness to the correctness of this prophecy," he wrote, "but I feel it within me that it is to be so." Grant finished the manuscript on July 18, 1885. 5 days later, on July 23rd, he died. The personal memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant was a huge bestseller, providing large royalties for the general's widow. Written in clear, unadorned prose, it remains a classic of American literature. And that is today's On This Day in American History. I will have to say that that's probably a book I'm going to look up. I'm going to have to look up and see if I can figure out what that is. Another great, just like the great Ronald Reagan. All right, what am I drinking tonight? Well, I kind of missed that in the beginning because I had that so much to say, but tonight is Jameson Black Barrel. This is my go-to, my number one go-to. And you know what's funny is with all of the talk from Mark K about my Redbreast 12, I actually took a look and I found out something that that I didn't know. The Jameson brewery, I guess. I can't really call it a brewery. The distillery, that's the word. The Jameson distillery actually creates about 5 different labels of whiskey. And one of them is Jameson, of course, but the other one is my Redbreast. So I actually like 2 brands from the same distillery. That's kind of interesting. And I can see why, because they are fairly similar in taste. But tonight it is Jameson Black Barrel. All right. So topic number one. I'm being told. Oh, I got to throw this up here. So I'm being told that I need to drink Kentucky bourbon. Actually I do. I do. I mean, I have, and I've also been asked, by Buddy whether or not I do drink bourbon. I have in the past. I do occasionally like Jack. I'm not too much into, Jim Beam. I mean, as an option. But Jack Daniels is okay. But as far as my favorites, it is definitely in the Irish sphere. I'm not too much into Scotch. So just to answer that question for you guys. All right. Okay, let me just see if there's anything back here. Nope. Okay, scrolling back through the chats. Okay, so Biden was announced this week as having the virus. All right. And the funny thing about it is that that announcement, I don't think really was taken in by a lot of people because of the fact that the announcement, I guess, just sort of fell flat. And even some of the conversations about some of his regimen and the things and how he feels. I mean, he kind of said that he's only got mild symptoms, of course, because he's been, double vaxxed, triple boosted, 50,000th boosted, whatever it is. And you also have a lot of these things like, yeah, Muddy brought this up too. Cancer as well, apparently, which, just as a side note, he has told that story before and he's talked about it being asthma, not cancer. But for whatever reason, for that particular speech, he brought it up and he changed it to cancer. So, yeah, anyway, all of this is contributing to what I'm about to show you. And realistically, this is just sad. I can't even imagine. I mean, Bill Clinton was bad. So was Barack Obama, realistically, but this is scary. And especially for him to go off on reporters and say things like, I would have 92% of the Democrats would vote for me in an election. We are almost at a 2/3, 1/3 split in terms of his approval and disapproval rating. And by that, I mean, we're almost at a 2/3 disapproval rating to a 1/3 approval rating. In fact, it probably would be that way if those 12% of people, according to this poll, which is right here above me on this gray line, if those 12% of people would actually pull their collective heads out of their rear ends and make a choice. But the thing that is a stark reality here, with his approval rating is the fact that if you look down here in terms of the party, obviously it's a huge split, between the Democrats. The Democrats all think but even then, I mean, he's got almost a 20% of a neither approve or disapprove within his own party. This is just amazing. But the thing that I was extremely interested in, obviously, is the fact that when they broke it out by race, obviously the African American community seems to be the only ones that are hanging on for him at this point, which is interesting enough, especially when you hearing stories about the Hispanic Latino community turning their backs on him. But what's even more interesting is the fact that, take a look at this state roster, and I'm going to hold it here for just a pause, but Hawaii so far is the only one that has an actual approval rating for him, and even that is less than 50% approval. The only reason I think that he got it is because roughly 10% or so are abstaining, saying they neither approve or disapprove. But the thing that's even more shocking is when you scan through that entire list, there is not one single state, save Hawaii, that thinks that Joe Biden is doing a good job. Hawaii is the only one out of the list of 50 states. And no, Barack, they're not 52. It's 50. There are 50 states, and Hawaii is the only one that shows that there is an approval rating. Now, this is based off of roughly 230,000 responses, based off of registered voters. So the actual population of people who reported from Hawaii could be modified in some way based off of just who responded. It could be a very low turnout or something, and they're only providing us with percentages here. But still, the point is you have 50 states, 49 are saying the man is doing a very bad job, a very poor job in office. And they are saying that due to a bunch of different reasons, I'm sure. But the fact of the matter is that the one kitchen table item, as Nancy Pelosi keeps talking about, the one kitchen table item that they will not address has to deal with inflation and prices, both at the pump and, at the grocery store, and just the generic things that people need to buy. And this is just sad. I mean, I can't even remember, even in the days of like Clinton and Obama, when his ratings were never this low, were never this underwater. And, so I don't know where this guy, I mean, unfortunately he is, I think he's in a cognitive decline. I think it's a really big problem that he's in a cognitive decline. And I think that, he's just gone. I mean, he's just really, really gone. But anyway, that being said, okay, we now understand a little bit more because of these kinds of reports, things like the Hispanic and Latino voting moving over to the Republican Party, the fact that Biden's ratings are so bad. You now can understand the importance as to why the Democrats have been pushing on the January 6th committee. And January 6th, I mean, they are really pushing for potential criminal charges against Donald Trump, because the only way they can prevent him from running, I mean, let's be honest, that's the only way they're going to prevent him from running in 2024 is if they can somehow stop him constitutionally. Now, there is a way to do that within the Constitution, in the fact that if he's found guilty of something like insurrection, they can prevent him from holding public office. That is pretty much about the only way that they can do it now. And so the January 6th committee has been really, really focused on taking care of this. But the problem that they have is that, at least so far, the January 6th committee has not been able to definitively prove what essentially would be, within a court of law, under a decent and just judge, I have to make that clear because under a decent and just judge, both sides would be fairly represented. The hearsay and conjecture that was tossed out in the January 6th committee by Hutchinson and, a couple of other people, all of that would be swept under the carpet or thrown out as evidence. There is literally at this point no real evidence to demonstrate that Trump not only coordinated with the people who did the rioting, but the fact that he even knew and did nothing about certain things like guns coming in and that kind of stuff. It's just there's no real evidence there. We've got a memo from the Pentagon to Congress, and constitutionally, Congress has control of the DC area. Okay, the legislature, the legislative branch, has control of the 10 square mile area that was set aside as the District of Columbia. They are in charge of all things that go on there. They're in charge of the Capitol Police. That's why there's a separate police department. I've said this before and I'll say it again. That's why there's a separate police department for that part outside of, Baltimore and Alexandria, Virginia, and all of those in those other states. It was done that way on purpose because they did not want the district to be under the control of any one given state. And so they set up this 10 square mile area and they basically said, this is where the country seat is going to sit and the legislature is going to be in charge of this area. So why they're not talking to Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or even Mitch McConnell, any of those guys that were in charge at the time that the January 6th incidents occurred is totally beyond me. But we have proof from the Pentagon that Donald Trump did authorize offering up National Guard troops for January 6th with the explicit purpose of doing crowd control. Now we also have this. Check this out in Just the News. This is a interesting article here where they say Trump gave an order to make sure the January 6th rally was a safe event. The Pentagon sent a memo from General Milley. General Milley apparently provided a recollection that undercuts months long of Democrats trying to suggest that Trump wanted to incite violence. Folks, all I can tell you is January 6th, the committee is a total political witch hunt. No matter what Cheney or any of the other Democrats say, Kinzinger, whatever, they all talk about, no, it's not politics. This is about getting and finding the truth. If that was the case, they would have allowed a split Democrat-Republican side. They would have allowed those like Jim Jordan and some of the other Republicans that were offered up by the Republican Party to sit on the committee. They would have allowed rebuttal witnesses in front of everybody and their brother in these public hearings. And they're not, they are just not doing it. Okay. So I'm sorry, but if the DOJ, which is run by Merrick Garland, and we've already seen that the Department of Justice has a bias toward conservatives. Okay. We've already seen all of this occurring. And so, if they decide to go after him and are able to convict him, which if the trial happens in DC, which it probably will, there is a good chance that he's going to end up in front of a judge that has a bias, just like Steve Bannon ended up in front and so many others that have gone on. But this just gives credence again to the idea that the January 6th committee is completely a partisan event, that it is designed to smear Trump in the court of public opinion and to try and prevent him from running in 2024. Now, we have a heating up situation. Moving on from January 6th, we have a heating up situation that I talked about with regards to China and Taiwan. Now, I brought up an article last episode where we talked about how Taiwan did not want Nancy Pelosi to go visit, and that they would do something, something drastic if Nancy Pelosi actually went. Well, check out this article in the Epoch Times. Apparently, Biden has now said that Pelosi's Taiwan visit is not a good idea. And he issued this one single day after China issues its threat. Now, I want to kind of bring in the Miranda Devine book about the laptop from hell. That's the title. Miranda Devine talks about the connection between the Chinese Communist Party, the CEFC, which is I think it's the energy company that's over there, and Hunter Biden. My guess is that China has sent something through to Biden and said, look, you guys can't do this. You can't go to Taiwan. We don't want you there. We think it's bad press, whatever. And Beijing Biden is going ahead and going right along with China because he doesn't believe that China's a problem. Xi has, I'm fairly certain that Xi has got him in his pocket. I mean, if you want to have a compromised president, this is an example of a foreign entity compromised president. I'm sorry. But I even saw an article where the majority, and I actually asked Dan Bongino about it for his questions for Dan on Friday, but he never got to it, was about a Washington Examiner article that came out that the majority of Americans, we're talking over 60% of Americans, believe that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were connected and that Joe not only knew about Hunter Biden's dealings, but also benefited from them. And what's even more disturbing out of that article is the fact that they believe that most Americans believe that nothing is going to happen to Joe in particular, but also to Hunter about his business dealings. Now, Hunter is being investigated. There is a possibility that Hunter might answer to charges, but I'm guessing that it's probably going to be low-level charges dealing with tax evasion or something along those lines, and not anything that would require further investigation into potential compromising interactions with the Chinese Communist Party in particular. We already know that Joe is not above doing essentially a quid pro quo. He bragged about it on TV when he was talking about Ukraine. So we already know that he's not above doing something in that sense, like, hey, pay to play kind of scenario. So from that perspective, I'm just saying we've got to keep an eye on this Pelosi's Taiwan visit. Okay. Now, the other thing that came out about Taiwan, if you remember on my last episode, I talked about how the chip manufacturers and doing chips and, all of the 92% of the chips are coming from Taiwan in all of our electronics. Well, check this out. Also from the Epoch Times, this one here is that the U.S. itself would face deep and immediate recession if chips from Taiwan stop flowing. Now, this is a warning from our Commerce Secretary. And as I told you, and I've said this a couple times, okay, as I've told you, we have a vested interest in America and indeed in the rest of the Western world, especially when it comes to manufacturing of silicon chips and computer chips and boards, because of the fact that they service our military. They service all of our electronics that we deal with. These aren't just consumer chips. They also are chips that deal with our guided missiles, our planes, our tanks, anything that we use, electronics within are going to be compromised over this. Okay. So just again, we've got to watch this. This is probably more strategically important, in my view, dealing with Taiwan and China than having to deal with anything going on in either the Middle East at this time, at this moment, or anything going on in Europe with Ukraine. This is and should be our top priority, because this is a serious risk of complications. Now, apparently there's some people in Congress who already have an idea about this, and they put forth a bill called, they've been calling it the CHIPS bill. And they put forth the CHIPS bill to try and avoid things like this, to try and avoid this weakness. And it's supposed to help bolster chip manufacturing here in the U.S. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't read it. I don't know enough about it to know how much teeth it actually has. However, knowing that government and trying to get involved in things like this, government entities, it's probably not going to be as effective as it would be if we would get companies like Intel, or, if Elon Musk decided to all of a sudden start up a chip manufacturing facility here in the U.S. that was entirely U.S. based, or something like that. I'm not entirely sure the government really should be getting involved in this, other than from a national security perspective. They do need to at least encourage the process of bringing chip manufacturing and pretty much any manufacturing back here to U.S. shores. We are in a very precarious position with this particular scenario, and I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of it. Okay. Now, as a part of that conversation, I talked a lot last week about Huawei. Now, Huawei is a telecommunications company owned by the Chinese. They manufacture a bunch of consumer grade products, whether it comes from cell phones. They also have routers. They have some other things. And this next article popped, and when I saw this, I mean, I couldn't even believe it. And, to be honest with you, this is really kind of scary. A couple of other articles have come out following this one, but this is the first one that actually sort of caught my eye and attention. And what's even better is the fact that it came from our good old buddies over at CNN. So CNN apparently has an exclusive story where the FBI investigated and determined that Chinese-made Huawei equipment could actually disrupt U.S. nuclear arsenal communications. Now, in this particular thing, this was a artsy-fartsy, I'm going to call it, project. It was a humanitarian project that was brokered in 2017. The Chinese government apparently was offering to spend $100 million to build an ornate Chinese garden at the National Arboretum in Washington, D.C. It was complete with temples, pavilions, and a 70-foot white pagoda. And the project apparently thrilled local officials. I mean, of course, because this is, beautiful park and so on and so forth. They thought that it would attract tourists to the DC area, much more so than things like, maybe Arlington National Cemetery, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the Vietnam Wall, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Monument. I mean, there is a whole bunch of historical monuments that somebody could go to. This is one place that I've never been, and maybe eventually when I get to retire, or if I happen to have the opportunity to go into that area on other business, that I might be able to go and spend some time at these places. I really would like to go to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier for sure. But apparently they received this offer, and they went ahead and built things. And the funny thing about it is that when U.S. counterintelligence officials started getting involved in some of the details, which of course is because of the fact that Washington, D.C. is our monument and so on and so forth, our seat of power. When U.S. counterintelligence officials started digging into some of these things, they found a huge bunch of red flags. The pagoda itself apparently would have been strategically placed on one of the highest points in Washington, D.C., and apparently the pagoda itself would be just 2 miles from the U.S. Capitol. They could do signals intelligence collection. So because I work in Wi-Fi in my normal job, I can tell you that there are ways to actually grab very low powered signals from far away if you use the proper antennas to be able to do so. This is one way that people can hack into Wi-Fi systems at businesses and things like that, provided that they can break the encryption and the authentication mechanisms. They can potentially communicate from a long ways away with something as simple, realistically, as like a Pringles can that's been do-it-yourself built in such a way they can do that from 1,000 feet away or whatever the distance is. Okay, so apparently what they found was that they wanted to build that the Chinese wanted to build the pagoda with materials shipped to the U.S. in diplomatic pouches. Now, for those of you that don't know what the diplomatic pouch is, it's basically an assurance that you can get any kind of material, even contraband, back and forth in and out of the U.S. because we are under the obligation, because it is a diplomatic pouch. And this goes all the way back to even like the American Revolution era, that when you have a diplomatic pouch, the foreign entity doesn't even open it. They respect it because it essentially is supposed to be, foreign soil or foreign whatever. But we expect also that the foreign entity doesn't try to smuggle things back and forth. Well, apparently as part of this project, the Chinese wanted to build it with materials shipped in U.S. diplomatic pouches. And customs officials are banned from examining that. So they also started investigating some of Chinese land purchases that are near critical infrastructure and things like that. So first of all, that garden project was canceled because of the concerns of federal officials. But they were investigating land purchases near critical infrastructure. Now, ironically about this, there was also a place in the Midwest, and I'm trying to think of the state. I can't quite think of the state, but there was a Chinese land purchase under the guise of a farm next to a military base that actually builds and flies all of our experimental drones. I just saw an article about that just before coming on and airing this. So we really, really, really need to pay attention to what the Chinese are doing, the amount of land that they're buying over here, and all of these kinds of things. Now, one of the things that that the FBI uncovered as a part of this investigation was that they uncovered a plan, apparently, from the Chinese to be able to set Huawei equipment on top of cell towers near these military bases in the rural Midwest. And this is according to multiple sources that are familiar with the matter. And the FBI determined that the equipment itself that was slated to go on these things was capable of capturing and disrupting highly restricted Defense Department communications, according to the U.S. Strategic Command, which oversees the country's nuclear weapons. Okay. Now, Trump wanted to ban Huawei. He wanted to get Huawei out. But take a look at this photo. And this is the Air Force Base. Located in Cheyenne, and it's an area near a host of cell towers that are actually using Huawei equipment. So we already have apparently cell towers that are close. And we already know about TikTok. We already know about the spyware that's potentially a part of TikTok. We already know, which is why everybody's telling you, stay off of TikTok, get rid of TikTok. TikTok itself has come out recently about having access to American-based information within the database. So the Chinese are certainly not, they believe that they can do all of this without a problem. They are certainly not quiet about it. And they're not, I mean, they try to cover it up, but unfortunately we've uncovered it on multiple occasions. But this is concerning. This is really, really concerning. To even think that we have Chinese-made, Chinese developed equipment near our military bases, and being able to do something like this is literally scary. I mean, it's completely scary. Some of our worst fears might come true here. So one of the things in terms of, so I wanted to bring those articles to light just to kind of show and demonstrate that I'm not talking out of my hat here. I'm trying to bring you factual information. I'm trying to bring you information that is pertinent and available from different sources with regards to things that are occurring in the space. Again, to bring a little bit of legitimacy to this show, to this podcast, to demonstrate that I'm not just some crazy conspiracy theorist running around without any information backing it up. Now, that being said, I'm not always 100% accurate. However, I do try very hard to bring you relevant information. Now, we have 2022 coming up in November. And beyond that, we have 2024. One of the things that I think, regardless of whether or not there actually is validity to the claim that 2020 was actually stolen from Donald Trump, there has been plenty of news all over the place that has discussed how fraudulent activities have occurred. You've got the whole 2,000 mules scenario. You've got people being convicted of actual fraudulent activities in multiple states across the U.S. So because of all of this activity, and even though a lot of people have been talking about how, especially those on the left have called out and said, well, none of the claims about the election being stolen have actually hit a court case and have been proven. I hate to tell you this, but there are a few that are in the works. And why do I say that? Well, take a look at this piece from the Washington Times that came out yesterday. Apparently, a couple of election cases have made it to the Supreme Court, and they have been put on the docket for the session that I believe starts in mid-August or early September. So these two election cases are very concerning to the progressive left. And they think it's going to upend democracy. But I'm going to remind everybody that according to the Constitution, no matter how you slice it, no matter how you break it down, according to Article 2 in the Constitution, it clearly states that there are only two entities that have control over elections. The first happens to be a bit of an oversight, a small bit of oversight by Congress. The rest falls to the states, and in specific, the state legislatures, not the state Supreme Courts, not the state governors, but the state legislatures themselves. They are the responsible party for our elections. How it's done and, how the process is taken care of within that state, what's allowed, what's not allowed. And this is part of the reason why the whole change in Pennsylvania that was done by the Supreme Court is such a hotly contested issue. And that happens to be, I believe, one of the cases. I haven't gone through it completely, but I believe one of those cases that's coming to the Supreme Court is going to essentially ask and answer with their decision the question as to whether or not the state legislatures are the de facto body in charge of our elections processes. Okay. Now, the governor obviously in most states has to sign off on whatever the elections happen to be before it gets sent up in terms of the presidential election, before it gets sent up to Congress to be validated. But outside of that, that is nothing more than realistically a ceremonial process in terms of the state electors going to Congress to report on what they've got going on. It's the state legislatures that determine how and why and where all of this stuff goes on. So these are going to be a couple of cases the Supreme Court's going to be hearing that is going to hopefully solve, and not create another ambiguity like they did with Roe v. Wade, but hopefully solve the question, who is actually in charge of our elections process, and whether or not the state legislatures can actually determine what happens when questions arise within those states. So this is something that we're going to have to take a look at and see. Now, another thing that's been going on here recently, obviously everybody has been impacted by and influenced by things like inflation. Okay. And there's been some talk from the White House about a potential recession. Now, I'm not sure exactly when the numbers come out, but in order for us to be in a recession, the definition of being in a recession is essentially 2 full quarters of negative GDP growth. To remind you, we've already had one. So this next number, whenever it is released about the GDP growth for the second quarter of this year, is going to be a big announcement. It's going to be a big number. We very well could be in a recession already. Some economists are already talking about us being in a recession. We just don't know it yet because that secondary GDP number, which does the definition of a recession, hasn't been released at this point. However, I can tell you that one of the indicators that we would have in terms of a recession has to deal with hiring of workers and firing of workers. It's a lot of these kinds of things that that I think is an indicator that we are actually in a recession. Now, this piece here adds to that. And let me go ahead and bring this up. So this piece also comes from the Epoch Times. I know some people are like, hey, you know what? I'm not really too fond of the Epoch Times. I actually like them. But this piece comes from the Epoch Times that apparently about 45% of small businesses are freezing hiring amid soaring inflation and labor costs. Now, I can tell you that the company that I work for on my personal side, they are looking at potential hiring freezes as well. So it's not just small businesses that are looking at this. However, this is an indicator. When you see businesses start to say, you know what, we just can't afford to hire people, and they start freezing hiring, that's going to cause our jobless claims to go up, which is going to contribute to the whole situation that we're in with regards to the jobs numbers and everything else that Biden has been claiming have been absolutely stellar. They haven't been. By all intents and purposes, we are in probably one of the worst economic situations that we've been in since the 70s under the Carter administration. And especially with inflation almost hitting double digits, we're going to have some serious problems coming here in the near future. Now, I don't say this to be a Debbie Downer or anything else, but it is to prepare my listeners and viewers for the potential pitfalls that we have coming up because of the inaction by the Fed in order to try and curb inflation. They did not respond right away. They've been slow to react. And even when they've been reacting, it hasn't been an awful lot. So it's basically setting us up to be in the position of the early 1980s after Reagan got hired by the people, brought in as the president. He enacted very, very hard-hitting measures to try and curb the inflationary rate. We were in double digits at that time, and he did a lot of things to curb government spending, to relax government regulations, and to bring in and also lower taxes. He did tax cuts. The Biden administration has absolutely no interest in doing any of this. They want to tax you more because, as far as they're concerned, they want to tax the people, the higher ups. He wants to tax them. And so, you know, we're just in a very bad situation economically. And these people who have, like I told you on the last program, they have roughly 2.5 to 3 years experience combined in the administration within the business world. We're having all kinds of potential problems coming down the pike. And this is not looking good for America. All right. So now I want to go and answer this week's questions for whiskey. All right. And this week's questions for whiskey also comes from Buddy. He submitted 2 of them. This one is basically asking about the Supreme Court, and we've seen a lot of violence going up to the Supreme Court and at the Supreme Court. We've had the attempted attack on Kavanaugh, which, by the way, none of the liberal Democrats have even bothered to denounce. We've had, the challenges of all of the people who were protesting outside their houses when they should have been arrested by under Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1507. They should have been arrested and charged with felonies for that, which didn't happen, of course, because of the Garland DOJ. But that being said, the question came up, do they have security? And if so, who does their security? Is it the Secret Service like the president has? And I can tell you that the Secret Service only covers the president and his or her family. Okay. Also the first lady, or the first man, depending on if we ever have a woman president, and a male, VP. But the Secret Service only covers the president, vice president, and cabinet members, and those kinds of things. It only covers those seats of government. Okay. But, I had to ask because I had to look because I thought that it was the U.S. Marshals that would have covered it. But it actually turns out I was wrong in that. According to Security Today, and this was a quick search, and basically it came up securing the Supreme Court because of all the hoopla that we've had going on. This article popped in, and it was actually written in 2018. But apparently there is a protection organization. It's one of the smallest federal agencies, and it's called the Supreme Court Police. And the Supreme Court Police, according to this article, is roughly about 125 officers, and it's led by the head guy is the Marshal of the United States Supreme Court. But they have no association with the U.S. Marshals. Again, that was my mistake. I thought it was the U.S. Marshals, but it's not. So apparently they have their own private protection force. The Marshal is actually hired through a process that the Chief Justice brings them on and promotes them, puts them in. And essentially they are responsible for securing them within the DC area. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if a Supreme Court justice travels outside of the domestic space, they can actually choose whether or not to have protection brought with them. And the article actually notes that Chief Justice John Roberts apparently did not specifically ask for protection from the marshals or from the Supreme Court Police for a trip in 2015 to Japan. So protection outside of the U.S. itself, apparently they have to ask for it. And so would I say that the Secret Service should take this on? Honestly, they have their own security details, so I don't see why they would necessarily need secure or Supreme Court protection. However, I do believe that we definitely need to start enforcing. We also need to start enforcing all of our laws that deal with things like picketing and parading in front of people's houses. And we need to actually get these people to start essentially making sure that these justices are not harassed in places like restaurants and those kinds of things. I think they need to be a little more proactive in terms of protecting these justices in light of today's existing political landscape. And that was questions for whiskey for tonight. And Dave actually brought this up. He asked, how do we submit questions? So it's really actually pretty simple. For those of you that have pets, because you know that I do Pet of the Week on Wednesday, for those that have pets that want their pets shown on the screen and everything, you can submit questions for whiskey. All of this goes to the same email address. The email address is fans, F-A-N-S, that's Frank Alpha November Sierra, at whiskeymusings.online. And Whiskey Musings is all lowercase, all one word. So once again, and the link is actually in the description for the video. So you just submit, and you can just send me any kind of communication at that email address, really. Whether it's backgrounds, like I get like I've had some of these backgrounds from certain people, whether it's, pet pics, whether it's questions for whiskey. The best thing to do is just put in the subject line what it is, and then, fill out the email and just send it to me. And if you're going to do backgrounds like this, I only ask that you try and do them in a 1920 by 1080 format, because that's my layout. It makes it easy. I don't have to do a whole bunch of conversions and scaling and everything else. And sometimes small photos, when they come to me, they don't scale very well. But anyway, so that's where you can do that. And I appreciate everything. That is actually the last questions for whiskey that I have in the docket. So next week, I'm going to need one. So think of one over the week and, get it to me by, I would say probably by Friday. And you can submit it to me again at fans, F-A-N-S, at whiskeymusings.online. That's .online, not .net, not .com. It's .online. And you can submit that to me. And I will do my best to answer it. And if I don't know the answer right off the top of my head, I will do my best to research it and try and find it out for you by doing internet searches and things of that nature. All right. Well, I see that I'm just slightly beyond my hour mark. I try to keep it to an hour. Thank you very much for coming. I do have one ask of all of you who are watching this video. I want to grow this channel. I want to grow this podcast. And the only way that I can do that is if people like my subscribers and my loyal listeners do me a favor, spread the word. If you can even just mention this podcast to 10 other people, and I only get one out of those 10, meaning I only get a 10% return out of those 10, then I can pretty much double the number of subscribers if every single one of my current subscribers asks 10 people, and of those 10, I only get one person who subscribes to the channel. So do me a favor, talk to everybody. If you like my podcast, you like the content that I bring, you like the informational format that I've got going on, talk about it. Please spread the word. I don't do any other advertising other than social media. And so, I would appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I know it's a big ask, but it's something that I really am trying to do. I'm trying to grow this, and I do appreciate all of you joining and being here on my podcast. We'll see you on Wednesday, Wednesday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time for the Whiskey Musings broadcast. And we'll see you on Wednesday night. Hope you have a great rest of your week and enjoy some of the information that's coming out of Mark K and Hannah Guile from the Mark K Show down at the TPUSA event in Tampa, Florida. They've done a couple of videos and things like that, so take a look at those. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Good night, everybody. Phew, I gotta find the button. Where'd it go?